Hello and welcome to another community chat. And tonight I'm joined by some of the event team members and Lindsay as well, who is our host when we go down to Wardlow in Derbyshire. So our theme tonight is defenders, which could be quite interesting. So we'll start by just a quick introduction. So Louise, would you just like to quickly introduce yourself, please?
Hi, I'm Louise. My defender is a Newfoundland girl. She's 18 months old and she's called Raven.
And Jenny.
Hi. So my defender is a 6-year-old golden retriever called Sam.
And Lindsay.
My defender is a 6.5 years old fox red Labrador called Hobbs.
And before we go to Julie, my defender is a 7-year-old female Staffy Labrador cross. And Julie has just an interesting story. Julie actually doesn't have a defender in her group, but she does have a super interesting story, which we'll hear about later. So, Louise, how do you find living with a defender? But firstly, how did you discover you had a defender?
Well, when I first got Raven from a 9-week-old puppy, I just thought she was just very confident, quite outgoing. So we thought follow her when she was a pup. And then I was in denial, and Heather kept telling me she's too much like Ava. Certain things she did, confidence going off on her own. And then as she matured, in about 6-7 months, we decided she definitely was a defender. But quite hard work as a pup because of her confidence compared to the follower that I've got.
Yeah, they are very different, aren't they? Chalk and cheese, I would say. Jenny.
Yeah. So my defender, I wasn't necessarily in denial, but I hung hard over what Sam was for a while because he has quite nervous tendencies on a lot of occasions. But having read Beyond the Breed and kind of spoken to Heather about it, knowing what I know now, I reckon his mother was an observer and potentially not the best to breed from. And I think a lot of that is where he gets his kind of like skittish nervousness from. But definitely, I would say there's a lot about him that's a really classic defender. I grew up hard work as a puppy, really hard work now, just physically. Trying to move him out the way. He stands in doorways and won't move. He uses his body weight for everything. I'm just covered in bruises all of the time. I mean, absolutely worth it. But yeah, he's like a bull in a china shop.
Yeah, classic.
Yeah.
Classic. Thanks, Jenny. Lindsay.
So I hadn't got a clue about any of this when I first got Hobbs, so I just got him as a puppy. Looking back at some of the photos, he was always the one that was kind of what our class is observing. When all the other puppies was asleep, he'd be the one awake watching out. When he was younger, he would often kind of run over and start barking at things if there was out of familiarity. So if we was out on a walk, he would see somebody and he'd charge off barking. And I would actually think he was protecting me. So obviously looking now, knowing about defenders, he was actually being a protector. He doesn't tolerate a lot of bad manners from other dogs. So again, I'm thinking that's now not know about defenders. That's the enforcement of the rules and what's acceptable and what's not acceptable within the social kind of structure of dogs. Maybe he's never really tolerated puppies. Not some puppies, but not many. So again, I think depending on the puppy's functional character, maybe depending on which ones he tolerates and which ones he doesn't. He is, I think we did classify him as a low confident defender. So again, similar to Jenny's, he's a little bit skittish, he's a little bit nervous and got a little bit of anxiety in him. So I think that's where the low confidence kind of comes in. When he was an adolescent, I kind of noticed a lot more of the defender, what you call the splattage traits, where he would just see a dog, run over, dependent on the dog, he may not like them and splat them. So again, at that point, I thought I'd got not a reactive or aggressive dog, but because he wasn't doing it to every dog, but just a dog that I had to kind of be aware that he may be like that towards. And then obviously when you came down to Wardlow for the first time and said that he could potentially be a defender, and this is what they're all about, I'm like, actually, okay, fair enough, I can understand him a little bit more now.
Perfect. And before we move on to Julie's story, which is super interesting, I just want to explain the splatting. It's a term that I use for my own defender because, like all defenders, mine is they're obviously very tuned into energy, more so than some of the other functional characters. And because I've got part staffy in my defender, she tends to look quite aggressive when she doesn't want to tolerate a dog. So she'll go over to a dog, sniff it, and if its energy is good, then she might just walk away from it. But the splatting is where she just floors another dog. So because she's part staffy, I have to be really careful out on a dog walk, and because her recall is really good, then I'm able to get her back before other dogs approach. And because for the same reason, because she's part staffy, obviously people would say, oh well, she does that because she's a staffy and she's aggressive. So it's important that we don't allow people to label our defenders, irrespective of their breed, just because they are rather intolerant of lower confident or lower energy individuals. So we'll move on to Julie's story because this is really interesting. So Julie, could you tell us from start to finish about the story you have on defender female, please?
So I was lucky enough to watch a litter of Cocker Spaniels grow up. So I've seen them from day one, and I've still seen them now. They're 6 months old now. So the defender in that particular litter, we would never have identified her as a defender when she was born. There was no size difference in her. There was nothing else to really clearly identify her as a defender. But from 4 weeks onwards, when the puppies were outside a little bit more, you saw quite clear defender tendencies coming out. She was mostly one of the most confident in the group. She would sit back, watch, observe, work stuff out, and then she would climb out the puppy pen. So she was the first one to work out how to get out the puppy pen. And then the breeder modified the puppy pen to stop her climbing over the edge, and she became she's called Ruby, this puppy. She became very frustrated by that, and you could see her, you'd literally sit and watch, and you could see that frustration, and her way of dealing with that, she'd just sit and bark. She knew where she needed to go, she knew how to get out, but what was stopping her, and her frustration was barking at it. If you ever watched them play, she was the roughest out of the lot. She was always the one that made everyone else cry. She was always the one that started the fight. So, and that particular puppy was picked by the fire brigade to be a search and rescue dog. And he came and picked that out of all the litters, and he picked her because of her confidence. So when he put her onto different surfaces, she wasn't fazed by it. When there was noises going on, where we live near an army range, so there was a lot of noise. The puppy wasn't fazed by any of that, and he did take that puppy in the end. And I saw that puppy again when that was 4 months old, and I was talking to the guy, and he is actually the trainer of that puppy, and I said to him, how's she coming along? And his words were, she's a bull in a china shop. She's a bull in a china shop. And I just thought that sums it up, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And that dog now at 4 months old, she was picking up tricks. She was picking up what he needed her to do to actually progress to be a service dog. So, and I'll get to see her again in another couple of weeks, actually. So it'll be interesting to see how she's progressed.
Yeah, that
So,
was
yeah.
super interesting. Yeah.
But she learned very quickly that she had to bark to get a specific toy. And literally she was picking it up just straight away. So fantastic to see.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's a really, it's a really great story, because we've got a dog that's totally capable of what's expected of her in the role that she's going to fulfill. And I think that's, for me, that's what I want for every dog to be chosen for, you know, we've got this kind of puppy, and therefore that kind of job will be the best for it. I know that's maybe a bit of a utopian view, but you know, if we can get somewhere towards that, it will be good. So let's think about what makes a defender a defender. So we've already talked about, yeah, they're like a bull in a china shop. So we've got, between us here, we've got a Labrador, a Goldie, a Newfie. We've talked about the Spaniel, and I've got a Staffy Cross. So all very different, but all with very similar traits. Jenny, do you find that Sam does a lot of splatting?
Oh yes. Oh yes. It's so interesting to hear other people describe my dog for me. Yeah, you're right. He won't particularly tolerate puppies, or just kind of bad manners, too much fizzy energy. He won't have it, and he really will run at dogs and just pin them. And I think I almost have the opposite problem to you, Heather, in the sense that because he's a golden retriever, people don't expect it.
Yeah.
And everyone gets very shocked by it. It's nobody is on guard the way I feel like they would around Ava.
Yeah.
It's interesting, very, very similar behaviors, but different interpretations on the basis of breed.
Yeah. And that I think is the biggest issue and the biggest problem that the dog world has at the moment, is everybody is quite breedist.
Yeah.
And it's important that this information, this knowledge, gets out as far as possible, particularly into the dog professional world. And I was talking to Jenny in a separate interview about how we should be, it's important for us as dog professionals to educate dog guardians on how their dog is a total individual. So Jenny and I talked about how we can help people in our classes to see their follower as not stupid or thick, just to, you know, and for people not to give up, because sometimes if a follower is working in a same class next door to a guide, the person with the guide is going to be like, oh great, my dog learns it first time, but the person with the follower is going to probably get so disheartened and maybe not come back to the rest of the course, because their little follower is just going, I don't get this stuff, you need to run it by me one more time. So it enables us to help people in a more constructive way by discussing why their dog is the way they are and why they learn the way they do. And I think that's another important thing for dog professionals, and certainly as a groomer, Louise, as well, for people to understand why one particular dog, you know, so I mean, Ava doesn't like her feet being touched, but then a lot of dogs don't. I don't think that's necessarily a defender thing. But for grooming, it, you know, it probably works the same way, to understand how to handle each individual rather than just, oh, the dogs. But Jenny and I were talking earlier as well about the dog is dominant, or the dog is aggressive, or it's fearful. You know, we have all these labels for dogs instead of understanding them at a deeper level as individuals, rather than just labeling them. I hate, you know, these terms of fearful and dominant and all this kind of stuff. So do you find it's do you find you get a lot of questions as a groomer from people, you know, saying, oh, my dog won't do this or my dog won't do that?
I think some of the easier dogs that I groom are possibly followers, because they are so laid back and they're just, you know, you see the way they come in, they're a bit more chilled. You can do anything to them, and maybe defenders can be quite easy to groom because they've got the confidence. Whilst you can tell with the observers, because if you think about, they're nervous anyway, because they don't like it. People think a dog going to a spa, they're going to enjoy it. A lot of them don't. But if you've got an observer coming in and they're a nervous Nelly anyway, and then you put them into a stressful situation, that's when you see this fearful biting, because they're just defending themselves in the end. But they're the dogs you have to take a lot of time with and be, you know, work with them basically.
Yeah, and I think maybe because followers are much more tactile, aren't they, than
Yeah,
in particular, they don't mind people touching them, because it's like, oh, you know, I like this, you know, they like to be touched, don't they? Like to be handled and to feel that closeness with people.
Yeah, the followers that are in creche that we know are followers, I can label them all as easy to groom.
Yeah, cool. Is that Ellie on your lap, Lindsay?
It is, yeah. She likes to make an appearance.
Yeah, bless her. Hi, Ellie.
My peacekeeper.
So
yeah, my defender's down there.
Lindsay, do you find that that it's easier to help people with defenders in the classes? I know that we had that experience with a defender in the last workshop, but do you find it was easier to, knowing this stuff, do you find it's easier to explain to dog guardians with defenders why they do the splatting?
I do now. I understand a bit more about them. Before, I would be a little bit, I suppose, cautious. So from a training perspective, I was just like, okay, well, let's give him space. He needs the space. Pop him on a long line, maybe, and just kind of be aware of what kind of dogs your dog particularly isn't friendly with or happy to be around. Now I know a bit more about defenders and the energy levels and what they'll tolerate and not tolerate and things like that, and maybe why they're doing what they're doing. Yeah, it's helping me a lot more in class. I see it a little bit easier. I can see the big bulky dogs that could potentially be the defenders, the ones that are kind of like being a little bit more grumbly towards the energetic kind of dogs. And so yes, I'm helping certain owners. If I see a defender or I potentially think it could be a defender, then yeah, I'm helping them a little bit more.
Cool. And I think for my own defender, when I was just discovering functional character stuff when I got her, that was back when I was setting up the creche in 2016. So actually it was probably about a year before this stuff actually whacked into my brain and went, hey, you really need to pay attention to this. And I had a little terrier at the time. Many of you will know him. And because he was a lone individual, I had 3 dogs. He was the only male. And as a 9-week-old puppy, twice between 9 weeks and 11 weeks, Ava went up to my lone individual, who had a huge personal space bubble, as you know. And she didn't splat him, but she did a big nose bump into him, and he absolutely flew at her. And I asked Isla about this in the early days of discovering functional characters, and Isla said to me, it's because he's the only male in the group, and she is saying to him, I'm a defender, you're a male, where's your strength? So she got injured a couple of times from him. In fact, 3 times, I think she was not seriously injured, but he did bite her on several occasions, because he's like, I'm a lone individual, get out of my space. And all the time she's she actually looked like an overseer because she was testing him the whole time. And the only time the pair of them got on was out on a walk where they were chasing around together. And she was his best friend out on a dog walk. But indoors, God help her, she wanted to walk past where he was sleeping because he would just growl at her, you know, and just he wouldn't fly out of his bed to attack her unless she, you know, did this nose bumping, this kind of muzzle punching. But so I think that taught me a lot about not just about defenders, but also about lone individuals and how the dynamics between a female defender and a male lone individual, how that can pan out. And there was about 4 years difference in age between them. So he was a 4-year-old when I got the defender. And the splatting is, I control it now by just not, I mean, she doesn't do a lot of stuff at workshops, as you guys know, but on the occasions where we think we have a defender, then I will bring her into the workshop on a line. And for those of you that have seen, so those of you that are listening to this conversation, if you've seen the video on the Wardlow workshop that we did in, I think it was early November 23, we had a pointer, a young male, entire male pointer who we thought was probably a defender. We brought Ava, my defender, in, 7 years old, and she didn't look as though she was going to splat him at all. So I let the line go loose, and she just went up and examined who he was and said, yeah, right, you're a defender. I'll just, and she actually just trotted straight back to me while she was still on the line in the working area at the workshop. So it's interesting that I can use her to confirm another defender at a workshop, but I wouldn't use her to confirm other functional characters because it's just not worth the, it's not worth the upset to all the other dog guardians at the workshop. So they are quite difficult to live with, and I certainly wouldn't want 2 defenders in the house. I really wouldn't. And I think if people have a defender, you need to think carefully about when you get your next dog or puppy, make sure that you don't have 2 defenders in the house, because it would just be, I don't know what you guys think. Louise, what do you think about having 2 defenders in your house?
I think it'd be hard work. It'd be hard work, especially the size of my breed.
Yeah.
But I find that I also find the helpfulness of them is because they are on alert all the time. If I'm, for example, if I'm outside and she hears something different or unusual, she'll alert to say, not in a bad way, she'll just give that one bark.
Yeah.
And she doesn't bark and run in. She barks and stands her ground till she knows what it is. She'll go and investigate. If there's something different, she'll have the confidence to slowly go up and investigate, whilst other dogs might run off. So the helpfulness of them, I find that they're quite, I wouldn't say guarding, I'd say they're just, as you say, protecting. They're letting you know there's something different out there. But having 2, I think, because Raven doesn't tend to splat, but she does. If a dog has she's very bold when she goes up to dogs in your face, and if they have a snap at her to say, get out my face, she'll go, okay, really? So she'll push them. So it does look a little bit testy, but I think a male and female defender would probably get on, because we don't seem to see any, what's the word? There's no hoo-ha between when 2 defenders meet. They've never sat at each other. They tend to just walk away from each other. So,
and it's interesting when we're at the dog park, all of us, that if Ava has a toy that Raven's just had, So my 7-year-old defender, I'm just explaining this for people. So my 7-year-old defender and your 15-month-old
18 months.
month-old defender. So, 5.5 years between these two bitches. And my defender will give up what she's got to your defender, even though she's 5.5 years younger. I find that super interesting that she just says,
Yeah.
you can have this, I don't mind. Whereas normally she'd just snatch it and run. I think cool, really cool. So do you find, Jenny, that Sam just does this one woof alerting for stuff? Is he kind of goes into protect mode for you?
He'll plow in. Yeah, it's not a kind of stand in his ground thing. He'll bark and bark and bark and really run it. So especially when someone kind of pulls up to the gate at night, like say in the headlights on and they shouldn't be there, or there's something in the garden that shouldn't be there, he'll disappear into the night. It's he's very, very brave, actually.
Yeah. And was there a time when you were saying that when your dad was there, he kind of walks behind, but he doesn't when your dad isn't there?
Yeah, there's a real difference. If there's another, I would say, a kind of a calm, strong male presence, Sam goes, I'm not necessarily needed right now. But if it's just me and him, his behavior is completely different. Very, very protective.
Do you find on a group walk, do you find that Sam's always out front, whether it be with you or other dogs? Because Ava's always out front and so's Raven.
Yeah, he actually tends not to particularly join in with the interaction. He almost does a kind of front perimeter sort of sweep. He's always not on edge, but you can tell he's kind of doing a job. Sometimes I think if I didn't know he was a defender, I would go, oh, are you not enjoying yourself? Like, do you not want to play? But he's kind of, this is his
he's fulfilling his role, isn't he?
Yeah.
I think they're sweeping out on the periphery of a group is a very different sweep to what we see hunters do. Because hunters have got their noses down, they're busy, so many things to tick off on their list. Whereas defenders are just, doing this kind of almost guard doggy thing, aren't they? Which is, it will be interesting we must think about doing some different kind of videos when we're next at Wardlow, because we've got all that when we go up to the top of the field. And if somebody's filming hunters and somebody films defenders, we can then compare the two sweeps that they do. That's super interesting. So so Jenny lives in the middle of nowhere, basically. And if her dad goes out on a check of the perimeter with her at night, then Sam is usually behind. But if her dad's not there, Sam is always in front of Jenny, which I think is just super interesting. Absolutely super interesting. So do you find any of this sweep stuff when you're out with a group as well, Lindsay? With
I think it varies. Like if I take my 3 out, sometimes he might sweep, sometimes he'll just be by my heel position or kind of hanging with me, and he'll just let the other two mess about. I don't know how much of that is training and being in heel, because I do a lot of heel work with me competing, or whether some of it is him just being a bit older and feel like, okay, I'll just let the young two be out in front and I'll stick with mum. But then there's other times where he will be out, probably more so when I'm on my own with him, actually thinking about it, rather than me having the other two. I think if there's the 3 of them, he's not so defender like, whereas when I'm on my own with him, he will be out more in front. So it's quite interesting actually, just seeing him vary the different, be a bit different with it. And probably also, I suppose, a bit like what Jenny said, if Paul comes up the field with me, usually when all three of them about, actually, he will be a little bit more out as well, rather than protecting me, I suppose, because Paul's there. So yeah, maybe a little bit of that if I actually think about it in a bit more detail. Yeah, it's quite interesting.
Yeah, and I wonder, as like Jenny was saying, I wonder how many other Defender owners, might think that their dog isn't enjoying their walk, because they're not interacting with the other characters.
Yeah.
Or how many dogs get labeled aggressive or dominant, or how many dogs end up in rescue that are defenders that have gone out and splattered another dog, seemingly for no reason, that we can see. The other dog hasn't done anything, but if the other dog's energy is low, or it's particularly if it's an overseer, because defenders and overseers are like two ends of a magnet. They just do not get on at all.
And I suppose if you imagine, say, like little Ruby, imagine if some nice retired couple decided they wanted a dog.
Oh no!
And got her. The carnage, like the destruction.
Yeah,
because
exactly.
she's so clever.
The dog would be totally frustrated.
Yeah.
It would be really interesting, Julie, wouldn't it, if he could let us have a short video of her work.
Oh yeah.
Or her on a dog walk with some other dogs.
The thing is, like, when we're out on the walk, because Ava does it as well, and I guess Sam does it from a distance, because they're confident and they're taking in what's going on. Their body language is, so the tails are always open, or they're alert. They've got volume. Is Hobbs like that? Does he display that confidence when he's out? So straight away, if another dog looks at them, it's yeah. I've never seen Raven with like a head down and a tail down when she's out. She's always puffed up to the nines.
Yeah, and looking back when he was younger, more so, his tail was always up, like you say, always on alert, more like, oh, what's happening, that kind of stuff. And a friend of mine takes him on a Monday for a dog walk, just so he gets away from me, he gets to see other dogs, he gets to kind of socialize, so to speak, with other dogs. And she says she's never had an issue with him, but he's always kind of, when she sends me videos, he's always on the peripheral, not necessarily playing with the other dogs. So it's actually interesting to see how he reacts or behaves away from me when he's with actually a different pack completely, and actually away from me as well. Which I find quite interesting.
Yeah, and on a similar vein, if I have Ava out on her own without Katie, the guide, then I see a very different Ava, almost super relaxed Ava, because she's not on duty, as it were, because the guide's not there. And we found that out in one of our very early workshops when we did Raven River, and Isla was there, and she said, take the guide out of the work area, and we did. And then you could almost hear the switch going. Ava just went, oh, I can relax now, because she's not kind of on duty in the guide. So that's super interesting.
I do find that, as I've got 2 followers, and if Ava's ever been in my group, it almost brings a balance to my group. It almost feels like they've gone, ah. And actually Ava can now do the defending job, and they can do the following.
Yeah.
And I've noticed that, and also in a bigger group as well, it almost just, the defender just brings a balance to that wider group.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really interesting. They are super interesting characters, but I still say I wouldn't want 2 at the same time. Even if they were chihuahuas, I wouldn't have 2 defenders at the same time. I just think that would be too much, way too much.
Yeah, I definitely wouldn't want more than 1.
So does anybody want to add anything else before we round up our conversation? I think we just needing to give people a flavour of what it's like to actually have a defender, and that, you know, you haven't got an aggressive beast on the end of your lead. They are just who they are. And if you have a bull breed or anything with bull breed in it that's a defender, then I suppose, at least, as Jenny said, at least people are going to expect something. Whereas when you've got something that's fluffy, and generally, you know, this is again where people generalize and get very breedist about it. Who would have imagined that Sam, lovely big fluffy Goldie, might splat a dog? You see Ava, this, you know, Staffy cross, you almost expect to be splatted. So I think it's really important for us to get out of this habit of being breedist and labeling. We need to really get to grips with this individual functional character stuff, and soon. Anyway, thank you girls so much for joining me, and thank you all for watching. If you've enjoyed this, then you can, let me just see, if you check out Louise is our groomer at Centre Barks Daycare in Richmond. So if you're in the locality of Richmond, that's North Yorkshire, not Richmond in Surrey. So if you're wanting a good dog groom, you know where to find Louise. Jenny is Jenny Hunter Dog Training. She's up near Newcastle. And Lindsay is Paws and Play Gun Dogs, and she's in Northeast Derbyshire. And Julie isn't a dog professional, but she is a member of the Beyond the Breed event team. So you can't check Julie out because she's not a dog professional, but you will see her at workshops if you've been to any of our workshops or if you come in the future. Anyway, thank you guys for watching, and thank you ladies for your input into our defender conversation, and I'll see you all again soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.